It's funny because I still struggle with this every day. And I taught it for years at Eastern when I was teaching lean management, and all the seminars I present at. I always talk about there's always a better way. But yet it's so easy even for me when I help implement something, when I put something in place, I say, okay, this is the way. And it's very difficult when, right, pride of ownership. And then somebody else comes and says, oh, well, what about doing this way? No, but I put this in place. Let's keep it. So I have to temper myself all the time and take a step back, because there is no 100% right answer in anything that we do.
Hey, it's Ari Santiago. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. I'm really excited to be sitting with my friend Brian Montanari, President CEO of HABCO Industries in Glastonbury, Connecticut. Brian, thank you so much for coming on to talk to us today.
Absolutely. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Listen, buddy. Well, first of all, Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too.
All right.
Too.
So do me a favor, Made in America podcast, start off with the same two questions. What do you make? Why do you make it?
We make aftermarket product for the aerospace industry. So none of our product flies in the aircraft. All of it is used to help maintain the aircraft, the engine, or the airframe when it's in for service. Okay. So it's really the unsexy part of the aerospace industry.
But important, unsexy, but very
important. Usually the last thing folks think about.
Right. And so why don't we talk a little about HABCO? So you guys make all this kind of ground support equipment that helps keep the various flying mechanisms in the air.
Right.
But why do you guys make that? Kind of give us the background. You know, HABCO's been around for a long time. So tell us kind of how this whole thing got started.
Actually, 2020 is a very interesting year for us. It's actually our 50th anniversary. So the HAB and HABCO is Henry August Backman. He was an engineer at Pratt & Whitney in the late 60s, early 70s, when a lot of the folks were leaving the OEMs to start their own little businesses. His buddies were all trying to form their own little machine shops. And he said, okay, I'll let you guys compete over the product, but whoever wins will need my test equipment to test the product. And that's how the business started in 1970. He started off in his garage, moved to a little 4,000 square foot facility in Glastonbury, and then moved into a bigger facility. His daughter started getting involved in 1986, Kristen Muchette. She bought the business from her father in the year 2000. And that's at the part of the time where the business really started transforming. It started off as a test and measurement company. Okay. And they would make complete one-off product. But it was also kind of interesting too, if you look at the history of the company, where it's kind of like a little kid, something shiny, you want to go after it. And when you're starting your own business, I'm sure you can attest this when you first start, it's very easy to want to branch out because there's an opportunity. Sure. And so he did test and measurement stuff. He did product for the medical industry. He even did a submarine. And the submarine was actually a very interesting story. It never got to the customer. The customer picked it up and it fell off the truck. And so that's the way the business started. Kristen started getting involved in a little bit more of the design once, build many times, where everything else prior was design once, build once. So
initially, HABCO started off, sounds like, well, number one, super custom, right, and B, a little bit like many of us were in the beginning, which is my number one goal is to put food on the table.
That's right.
So whatever a customer needs that they're willing to pay for, I'm willing to do it.
That's right. And I'm going to service the customer for whatever they need. Because everybody knows the only way to grow your business is to service your customers.
Absolutely.
And that was really what the heart of HABCO was when it started. And then Kristen started getting involved with some other businesses within the aerospace industry, and in particular got involved with a company who had good ties with Sikorsky and started doing some ground support equipment product for Sikorsky. And that was a really nice fit for HABCO, and it was the first, the entree into the ability to design it, build it many times. Maybe not build it many times at the same time. Right. Most of the things that they did and we still do today, an order for us is quantity one. Okay. If we get an order for two of the same things at the same time, we high five.
Very exciting.
So it was a really interesting transition. I started working at the business in 2007. I had met Kristen when I was working at a prior company. She had done some benchmarking at one of our facilities and just started helping her out, giving her some, just going through some of the things that she saw at my facility. She asked if I would come give her some pointers. So I came into the shop a few times when I was in country and in state. And then she asked if I'd help her find somebody to run the business, a COO. So I was helping connect her with some other folks. And then she said to me, well, what about you? Would you be interested in doing it? And at first I said no. I had a good job. I had 14 facilities in 9 countries I was responsible for. I was really enjoying what I did, but we had to just had her second child, and she was 4 days old. And I spent the 2 weeks right after her birthday, after she was born, in Zurich. And at that point in time, I knew it was a little bit difficult on the home front, especially with my wife being a career person as well. So I started to think about it, and she finally convinced me to come work for her. And it was an interesting transition going from 14 facilities in 9 countries to a 12,000 square foot facility with 20 employees.
I bet.
A very big change. But I loved it. And it was a really, really good time to try to, for me personally, to branch out and get outside of my comfort zone and get into this one-off business. And especially, my background's in lean manufacturing, lean operations. And we always talk about value add versus non-value add. And so it was really interesting to go to HABCO, where all of our product is test and support equipment, which is by definition non-value added product. It doesn't affect the fit, form, or function of the product of the aircraft or anything. So it was, how do we take that mindset of optimize flow, reduce inventory, improve efficiencies, but do it in a manner and one-off business for a product that people really don't want to be on. I'm probably one of the only CEOs in the world that will stand up and say, I don't want you on my product. The more you're on my product, the less you're up in the air, the less you're flying your mission. So the challenge was really interesting. And we worked really hard to try to diversify the business. Back when I started, we were 80% rotary wing. And of that 80% rotary wing, we were 80% military. So very heavy
That's
Sikorsky.
That's a very, very heavily Sikorsky company.
And, mainly on the H-60 platform. So we worked very hard over the years to diversify. And today, starting from that, when I started almost, a little over 13 years ago, 20 employees, very small in revenue, very small facility, to now having, we're almost at 100 employees. We have 2 locations in Connecticut, about to open up our 3rd, and we just started our first operation in Central Europe. So it's come a long way.
I bet.
But one of the big things that...
Pretty soon you're going to be back to 12 facilities in 9 countries.
Yeah, exactly.
And traveling again. Good thing the kids are older.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, so true. But now what I'm very pleased about is I believe that we are one of the most diversified businesses in the aerospace industry, because we do fixed wing and rotary wing, commercial and military, engine and airframe, and we sell to the OEM and the end user.
So you're kind of covering all the different gamuts.
We are. And, that was a very big strategic objective for us. But with that comes a lot of challenges.
Yeah. Well, listen, can't get anywhere without facing some challenges.
Exactly.
So you want to put a lot out there to unpack, Brian, which is kind of your normal MO when we have a conversation. So let me kind of backtrack a little bit. I think people's kind of backgrounds on how they got where they got is always super interesting. So talk a little bit about, Brian before HABCO, and you touched on it a little bit. And I know the family was a big reason that you decided to kind of take the opportunity, but it was also a very interesting opportunity, I think, to give you something different. So let's just start with, kind of where were you before HABCO? What were you doing? How'd you get from, playing soccer, I think, in college all the way to, 9 countries, 12 facilities?
Yeah, many pounds ago.
That's right.
Yeah, I went to school for my undergrad was in finance. I played soccer in college, which was kind of my priority at the time, not exactly knowing what I wanted to do. And my objective once I started getting into my studies was I wanted to work on Wall Street. And that was kind of what my focus was.
The goal, baby.
I would drive by a factory and say, who would want to work there? And I'd look at the, I'd look at the skyscrapers in the city and say, I want to be in a corner office. Right. And it was just never, manufacturing was never something I thought of. During college, I got an internship. I wouldn't call it an internship. I got a summer job at the wire mold company in West Hartford, driving fork trucks.
There you go.
And it was one of the most miserable jobs I ever had. Not because I didn't enjoy what I did. The summer help was hired to work during the summer when everybody else was going to their homelands and taking the summers off. There's a big international workforce at the wire mold company. So we weren't allowed any days off. And, the shift started very early in the morning. And if we were on overtime, we usually started earlier. So there was times I was starting at 4 o'clock in the morning and work all day. And then my buddies would be going out at night and doing their thing. And I'm
sleeping,
can't hang out, right. and go. So, but that was my first interaction or involvement in manufacturing. I didn't really know much about it other than I needed to pull parts, get them pulled properly, and get them shipped out to the customer. Mm-hmm. The second summer came. At the end of that summer, I said, I'm never doing this again. The second summer came, and I got a phone call from HR. Said, do you want to come back? And I said, no way. And she said, well, how about this pay this hourly pay. I said, okay, I'll be there. Started again, did the same thing the next summer, but really put my focus on, at that point in time, I really want to get into what my studies were. So there was no way I'm coming back the next summer driving fork trucks. Got a phone call again the next summer. Do you want to come back and do it? And I stuck to my guns and said, nope, I'm not going to do it. And they asked me why. And so I explained it. So the HR said, well, what about an internship? Do you want to come work and have an internship here? I said, beautiful. So I came, and my internship was in the JIT office, just-in-time promotion office. And that's really where I first started learning a bit more about lean and participating in a lot of Kaizen events and working with the Shingijutsu consultants and just trying to learn as much as I can, but never with the mindset of thinking that I'm going to do this for a living. It was just because I was intrigued. It was really interesting to see how in a 5-day period of time you can make such big improvements in an operation. And at the end of that summer, the vice president of operations offered me a full-time job for after graduation, and I turned him down because I wanted to work on Wall Street.
Right.
Then he called me at the Thanksgiving break and offered me a job again, and I turned him down again. And then spring break, he called me and said, just come in and talk to me. And so I did, and he said, well, what is it that you want to do? And I gave the same spiel that I memorized for every recruiter that I was speaking to during college, and I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, how about this? How about you come work here at Wiremold, do 6 months in manufacturing, 6 months in accounting, 6 months in finance. Then you can pick whichever one you like, and that's the one you can go with. I said, okay, well, man, where am I going to get that opportunity?
Right.
And it started, I'm seeing and talking to my roommates and my buddies from school and my friends from school who were planning on moving down to New York City, and they were moving to Hoboken, and the amount of money they're spending on an apartment that was tiny and dealing with all that. I said, okay, I can live at home. I can mooch off mom and dad for a little bit longer and start my career. And I did. And I realized when I first started working there full time, I realized that I'd rather affect the bottom line than just analyze it. Yeah. And I think part of what's instilled in me today was my first official week working full time. I got a phone call from HR that said, instead of coming to West Hartford, which is where our main facility was, you're going to meet Art Byrne, who is the CEO of Wiremold. You're going to meet him at the airport, and you guys are going down to Memphis, and you're doing Kaizen events down at our warehouse in Memphis. I went, okay. And I showed up at the airport. I, of course, knew who Art was. I didn't think there was any way he was going to know who I was. And he did. I don't know whether Betty showed him a picture or something.
He got prepped up in advance.
And I'm sitting there just having a conversation like this in the airport, and they announced for boarding of first class. And I expected Art to get up and go sit at the front of the plane. He didn't go. So I thought maybe he was just going to wait till I boarded and he was going to take his seat at the front of the plane. And he didn't. He sat in the back of the plane near me. And we arrived down in Memphis. We got in the rental car, and I was wearing business casual. And he said, I hope you brought some casual clothes. I'm kind of casual.
You weren't casual.
And he said, you have jeans and a t-shirt. I said, I do. He says, all right, let's go check in the hotel and put jeans and a t-shirt on. And we spent the entire week in Memphis tearing down racks, organizing the flow to be better pick parts from the warehouse to send out to the customers. And here I am with the CEO of this very large company with a tremendous amount of facilities, and he's spending his time with me and the rest of the folks on the team, and in jeans and a t-shirt and tearing down the racks. And that meant a lot to me. And for me, that part of my career is what really it was super important, because I think back on that all the time. It's so easy to get caught up in my office or in the conference room and not be on the shop floor. And I think back about Art Byrne and the way he led organizations, and you can see what Wiremold did. Yeah. And the really interesting thing to fast forward a little bit, and then I go back on more of the history. When we purchased HABCO at the end of 2012, December 28th, 2012, so we just had our anniversary.
That's right.
A few days ago, Art Byrne and almost the entire executive team of Wiremold all invested in HABCO. So for me, to start my career at Wiremold, idolizing this executive team, to have them put their own money into the investment to HABCO really meant a lot, and helps my, think about the career coming full circle in that manner.
Yeah, and listen, we'll definitely talk about that. But I think, it's interesting, any of us who kind of been in the business world and in the investment decision-making world in a while, one of the axioms you hear all the time is, don't bet on the horse, bet on the jockey. Yeah. So in the end of the day, their investment in HABCO is really their investment in you, Brian. And I think, they're all really happy that they invested in you, and probably what they saw in you from the early stages, has probably led into that.
I got a lot more work to do to make them really happy. But thank you for saying that.
Isn't that always the way?
Yeah.
So you're in wire mold.
Yeah.
You're kind of getting all this experience. Obviously, they saw something in you right from the beginning to kind of get you going like that. Where did that go from tearing down racks in Memphis? Where'd you go from there, and how'd you kind of get into running facilities? I mean, you're big lean guy. I mean, you teach it, professor of lean, you're a big part of lean is a big part of your DNA and what you do. So how'd you get into that? I mean, give us kind of how you kind of grew into that.
Sure. Well, wire mold was written about in so many books, and what Art did with his leadership team, it was in the DNA of the business. So you couldn't work there, I don't care in what position, without being involved with lean. Fortunately for me, I started in the right areas to be, really at the center of it. So after I did a stint in the lean office, in the JIT office, there was an opportunity to become a buyer planner. And they asked me if I would take on that role of buyer planner in what was their largest line of product. And basically buying and planning for me at the time was making sure that we always had inventory available to build our product, but never too much inventory, right? So, being a buyer planner for me was, when I played soccer in college or growing up, I was a goalie. Mm-hmm. Goalie was my favorite position, but your team wins 1-0, who gets the credit? Who scored the goal?
Right.
If you win 1-0, whoever scored the goal gets the credit. If you lose 1-0, whose fault is it?
The goalie's fault, baby.
And to me, that's exactly how I felt as a buyer planner. If you didn't have enough inventory, it's your fault. But if you had the right amount, if you had inventory but a little too much, it's still your fault. So you had to play that fine line, and it's a really interesting role. So every time I have, people in purchasing or buyer planners that work for me, I feel their pain. I know what it's like to be in that role. But that for me was a very interesting position, because I started getting a lot more involved with the folks on the shop floor, interfacing with them every day. Also, obviously working with management and with the suppliers and setting up your blanket orders and making sure that you had your right Kanban levels in place. I did that for a bit of time, and then an opportunity came up to be a supervisor. So they asked me if I would start to supervise, which was really interesting. 22 years old, and I'm supervising folks that were my grandparents' age, and everything in between. And that was a challenge in a union environment. And for me, what I started to do when I was in the buyer planner role, somebody gave me some pretty good advice, which is you don't necessarily have to be the smartest person in the room, but be the hardest worker.
The hardest worker.
Right.
First one and last one. Actually, before you get off that, I just want to take one thing, because it's funny, a lot of times now there's a lot of time spent talking about the multi-generational workforce and how people address that. And I'm just curious, kind of your take. Now you're kind of, looking at hiring folks and trying to manage that multi-generational workforce, but you've actually had the luxury of being a person who worked in that. And I think not only worked in it, but similar experience to what I had, which was at a very young age, being responsible for people that could have been your parents' parents.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It was a struggle at first, because I know I got challenged. Let's test the young guy out, see how he does. And even suppliers did the same thing. I remember one supplier in particular that the day I got put into the position and I started talking to him, I got an email with a price increase. I knew exactly what he was doing. So to me, it's so much of what I do is try to always, just treat people with respect. Mm-hmm. I'm not always right. I'm often wrong. But if it's okay to be wrong, if you're treating people with respect and going about it the right way. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a big part of what I focused on when I was supervising early in my career is, everybody has different hot buttons, right? And what motivates one person is not what motivates another. And I had to learn very quickly at a young age that, the way I'm going to motivate you is very different than the way I'm going to motivate the person next to you. And I just focused on the golden rule and focused on just having respect for people.
Did they train you? Was this something you just sort of had in you? Did you study yourself?
No, I really don't believe you can read books. You could go to leadership seminars, and you're always going to learn. Mm-hmm. But it has to be in you. Mm-hmm. And I still struggle with it. I'm not the best leader. I know that. I know there's far more people in this world that can have my position and do a better job than I do. But it's the constant focus on improvement. Mm-hmm. And that was, for me early on, I give my parents credit for the household they ran and the respect that they provided, but also mandated out of their kids, right? Yeah. And so one of my favorite lines to say when, when something happens, I said, I was raised better than that.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning like, we were just down in New York City this past weekend, and this woman was standing next to me with her husband, and she said, "It's my husband's birthday." I said, "Oh, happy birthday." She said, "Guess how old he is?" I said, "I was raised better than that." I don't guess, right?
That's right.
So I think a lot of my upbringing had to do with how I tried to live my work life.
Is that a little bit, because it's interesting you brought up this sort of topic about feeling like, this idea that you can always learn, you can always get better. And that's a little bit of lean, right?
Absolutely.
The idea of there's always the next improvement that could be made to make it just that little bit better. There is no final state. There's always the one step better state.
Yeah, and it's funny because I still struggle with this every day. And I taught it for years at Eastern when I was teaching lean management, and all the seminars I present at. I always talk about there's always a better way. But yet it's so easy even for me when I help implement something, when I put something in place, I say, okay, this is the way. And it's very difficult when, pride of ownership. And then somebody else comes and says, oh, well, what about doing this way? No, but I put this in place. Let's keep it. So I have to temper myself all the time and take a step back, because there is no 100% right answer in anything that we do.
Yeah.
And it's how do we go about improving it? And when I left Wire Mold, it was a difficult decision.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So you've had this great experience at Wire Mold. They give you so many opportunities. You grew so much. Was it just at some point just time to leave the nest?
No, and I, not at all, because I could have stayed working at Wire Mold a lot longer. I think it's really good, and I don't want all of my employees to hear this, but it's really good to leave. Right? There's very few people we hire today that I expect to retire at HABCO. They're fresh out of college.
Right.
It's not in their best interest, I believe. Go learn. I've had it multiple times where we've hired folks right out of school. They've gone somewhere else and they've come back. And they've come back far more experienced and far more knowledgeable than they would have been if they stayed. So I definitely felt like I had a lot more to learn at Wire Mold. But one of the gentlemen I worked with, Steve Brown, was one of the team leaders. He and I we were on a couple of projects together, and then I wound up coming onto his team, and he sent me on some other projects that I learned a lot from. And he got an opportunity to go take over as vice president of operations of a wire and cable company in the northeast part of the state, a company called C&M Corporation. And he left, and after a few months, he said, "I can really use you. Do you want to come? Do you want to come here?" And I said, "Sure." So I went there. I started off as a production manager, and then I formed the lean office and hired a bunch of folks to come in and do it. And we really had a lot of fun transforming that business. It was a $50 million company, so it was much smaller than Wire Mold, but still a significant size company with a lot of challenges. It was a wire and cable company, which at the time in the late 90s, when a lot of the manufacturing was moving, not just down south, but overseas, Mexico and China, they were struggling to keep the business. So we had to focus on improvements. And that was a really interesting jump for me, because I didn't fully appreciate that Wire Mold was different than every other company, right? But you can sit there and say, well, this worked at Wire Mold, so it's going to work here. And there was definitely some things that absolutely did. But I learned very quickly at that second job that take the tools and apply it to the business. Don't take the tools just as they are and force it in. And so I definitely made some mistakes early on, but we had some really, really good results and a lot of accolades. We had a lot of awards and written up in a lot of newspaper or magazine articles about lean, and loved it. And had some good opportunities there, and we had done a few joint ventures, and I spent some time out in Detroit starting up one of the ventures, and I loved it. And then my boss gave his notice. And he went to a medical device manufacturer. But as he gave his notice, he said, "Don't worry, you're coming with me too." And 6 months later, I was with him again. So we went to a company called Novometrics, which was a medical device manufacturer in Wallingford, Connecticut. And so now I've gone from Wire Mold, which is metal forming, stamping, presses, heavy manufacturing. Then I went to a wire and cable company, and now I'm at a medical device manufacturer, and I'm learning about the FDA, and I can't just go and make improvements without making sure they're all documented and having all of our processes,
custody,
everything, right? So that was a really interesting challenge, and Steve gave me some responsibility that I never had before, some departments that I didn't have any experience with, frankly, didn't want. And, one of those in particular being inspection and quality. Not that I didn't care about quality, but, like my responsibility is to get product out the door. You guys, quality, you can inspect it.
Somebody else figure out if it's good or not. I'm just trying to ship, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't that I was kicking and screaming. I'm like, Steve, you really going to want me to run the quality group? And he said, yeah, it'd be good for you. And it was, it really, really was, especially in a regulated industry, because that, I believe, really set me up for the regulated industry I'm in now on the aerospace side. So worked at Novometrics for a few years. We had done some acquisitions. We had really, really good successes in lean. One of the best things we did was, a lot of companies at the time were still outsourcing and sending product to other countries. We actually insourced. Mm-hmm. We brought product back from overseas because we found it was actually less expensive to do it in Wallingford, Connecticut than it was where it was. And had a really, really, really good time with that. We got acquired by a company called Respironics, who was a big player in the medical field. Yep. And they made the announcement they were going to shut the Wallingford facility down and move it out to California. And they asked me if I would move to California and run the operation there, which I turned down. Our first child was just born, and my wife was pretty ingrained in her career. She's not from the area, but she'd moved out here, and her career is here, so it wasn't the right fit. So I decided to, when it was done, leave that, and I started a little consulting business with my boss at the time, and we had a little software company that we had, and I spent a lot of time just it worked out perfectly because as my wife was on maternity, I got to be home and help her out and set my schedule up as she was going back to work. And I had two clients that I really spent some time with. One was a company called Electric Cable Assemblies. They make pop-ups that go on your conference table. So a buddy of mine was running the company, and another company I got introduced to was HID, which is the ID badges are on your doors. So
are you doing like lean consulting? I was for them? Like so you're just going in there. So you've got all this experience from what you learned at Wire Mold, then what you sort of transitioned to all these other places, how to implement lean, and now you've done it. You've been in quality, right? You've seen all this different stuff. So you're saying, man, I've got this toolbox of talent. And now you're just talent for hire.
Yeah, and it wasn't a desire of mine to be a long-term consultant, but it fit the time perfectly with us having our first child. So I had some flexibility, and frankly, I enjoyed it.
Right.
And so was doing with electric cable assemblies for a couple of days a week, and then with HID for a couple of days a week. They had an operation in North Haven that was their only custom card division. Everybody else around the world was doing plain white ID cards, right? And they had a really bad on-time delivery problem, a really bad quality problem. And the vice president of operations somebody had told him about me. And so I had lunch with him and told me he hired me out of the spot to come start helping him out. And I did. It started off with 1 day a week, then 2 days a week. And then he convinced me to come on and run the Connecticut operation, which I did. And that was fun. That was a really good experience. It was similar to Wire Mold in the fact that it was high volume production, low mix.
Yep.
So you could really, really apply the tools.
Yeah.
And we did, and we went from 55% on time delivery to 98% on time delivery. It took us, when I first started, it took us longer to make an ID badge than it took Boeing to assemble a 737. Right, and I remember that was the the lessons I would always go through, compare making a card to assembling an aircraft, and we got that lead time down tremendously, and it went from being the biggest loser from a profitability perspective that facility was to a really profitable business, and with that came more responsibility. So then I was asked to run global operations, which at the time was 6 facilities in 5 countries, and then 14 months later, it was 14 facilities in 9 countries.
That's how those things happen.
Yeah, but what I learned there was definitely surround yourself with people smarter than you. I knew that, and but it wasn't necessarily in positions where I was the one hiring folks and pulling people in. Where at HID it was my responsibility, and I brought some folks that I had prior experience working with that were some of the best employees that I've ever had, and they were folks that were peers of mine. So, that was a challenge in and of itself. But when we have 14 facilities in 9 countries and we can travel the world together and make sure that we're, when you work with people that you click with, and I think this is what Steve liked about me, why he brought me with him, was because 1 + 1 isn't 2 in those cases. When you have that chemistry with somebody and you're, generating ideas back and forth, what you come up with is far more, is far better than you would have on your own or even with two people who don't connect. And that's the way it was for John Paul and I as we were traveling the world together, and received a lot of accolades. We won the Shingo Prize a couple of times, which is considered the Nobel Prize for manufacturing. Our Connecticut facility had won that twice, and a lot of exposure from not a personal side, but just a lot of folks from around the world that would come benchmark the company.
Come see how the company was doing. So let me ask you a couple questions, like real specifically on that. So, everyone talks about hire people that are smarter than them. Yeah. How do you execute that, Brian? Now you've had the opportunity at multiple places to hire people around you. So someone's listening to this podcast and they're like, something, I hear that all the time. I think I'm doing that, but maybe I'm not doing it. How do you know that you're doing it? What do you do to make sure you're doing it? How do you make that happen?
Yeah, I still don't know the answer to that. That's the reality of it. There's been oftentimes we've hired folks who I thought were perfect for the business, and maybe they were perfect for elements of it, but in the end, weren't. I think the most important thing you can do at first to try to hire somebody better than you is know where your weaknesses are, and that's something I reflect on regularly. And I know where some of them are. Other ones, people tell me where my weaknesses are.
It's a whole Johari window conversation we're about to have right now.
Yeah. Right. But that's the reality of it. If I can make sure I'm plugging the gaps in the areas that I don't have the experience in, that's the way to go about it. Right. We still have plenty of gaps at HABCO. We've grown tremendously. We're going from 20 employees to almost 100 employees, and our revenue has grown 5x in the last 8 years, the last 8-9 years. And with that, we've had some great hires, and some of those folks were great at the size we were, when we were a third of the size.
Right. The business is changing underneath you, right, which can make the whole thing a little bit more difficult.
Right. And that's tough because it's very difficult to promote somebody into a position where they're very good at, and then you outgrow them, and then have that conversation about going back a step.
Right.
And that,
So let's kind of jump onto HABCO a little bit. So, you go work for HABCO, right? You get convinced to take the job. You're like, okay, family situation's working. Was the challenge, it's interesting, was the challenge of sort of getting away from, high volume, low SKU count to something that was the complete reverse? Was that a real allure, an appeal to you to go, let me try something totally different?
It was. I think what appealed to me more was the entire quote to cash process, because every position I had been in, even though I had P&L responsibility, I wasn't responsible for booking the orders. I wasn't responsible for collecting the cash. And going to a business of this size, knowing what I wanted to do when I grew up, right? Which is still working on growing up. I knew that was a piece that I needed. And so, frankly, I took a significant step backwards going from HID with 14 facilities in 9 countries to a 20-person operation.
Yeah.
But for me, it was important to get involved in sales. I had never had sales responsibility, and I had never had any responsibility on the finance side. So that was really what intrigued me. And then obviously the challenge on the manufacturing side. But almost every company I worked at, with the exception of Wire Mold, because they were very robust, every company had major problems that I went to work at. Major operational challenges, right? Not necessarily saying financial, but major operational challenges. Yeah. So I go in there and I'm licking my chops because I know exactly where I want to go start. And HABCO wasn't like that. It wasn't that HABCO had operational problems. It wasn't that HABCO had tremendous amount of inventory that we had to reduce. It was a purely one-off build, and we didn't even count inventory because it was immaterial from a balance sheet perspective. And lead times, you could tell the customer that they're going to get their product in 24 weeks and they're not going to bat their eye because they're some of the product we're building at the time was, they knew it was going to be long lead time, or they're just putting, the military would fill the supply system with it because they already had other inventory. It was on a min-max. So what do you mean 24 weeks? We could get that down to 12 weeks. Well, why?
Who cares?
Right. Who cares? Right. And so that, for me, like that mind change was really interesting. And I knew when I started all the other implementations, you start on the shop floor. Let's implement 5S. Let's get some workplace organization. Let's put Kanban in place and reduce our inventory. And you go to HABCO, and that's not the issue.
Can't use the old Brian Montanari playbook.
Right.
Got to throw that playbook out.
And so really where we started with was the front end of the business. We started, when I say front, more so the mid-size. Once we booked an order, our longest lead time was getting that product designed and released to the shop. Once it was released to the shop, then it could flow through.
Right.
So it really flipped everything upside down for me, where I'd spend my time and focus. And I didn't put any effort into changing the shop floor for at least 6 months, because we were focusing on the front end of the business.
When you were hired, was your impression, what were you led to believe you were walking into? Were you kind of brought in to say, listen, she was getting ready to kind of phase out and she wanted some more free time? Was she one of the other people you had talked to that's like, hey, we've got some challenges, we need you to come fix it? Like, kind of what was your expectation going in?
She definitely had some challenges, but nothing nothing that was earth shattering. She wanted to grow the business. She had, one of the things that really intrigued me was she already had the hardest part done. From what I understood in the aerospace industry, was she was already approved supplier.
That's right.
At Sikorsky and Pratt & Whitney and all these other companies. So once you're an approved supplier, okay, now you focus on your performance, and that's how you penetrate more.
Sure.
But I did know that she was pretty open that she wasn't sure how many years she wanted to continue to spend in the business. She and her husband worked in the business as well. They had a daughter that was in high school at the time, didn't know if she was going to have an interest in being involved in the business. And Kristen was also saying that she would be looking to not get out of the business, but have some more free time. She was really into tennis and wanted to take some time off. So she was looking for me to help, to kind of run the operations for her. And that was really what intrigued me.
Gotcha.
It was the sobering part when you sit there and you think about, okay, not that I was ever a person that would ever complain about management. That's never been anything that's been part of my DNA. But throughout my career, you can always second guess and say, I wouldn't have done it that way, or why'd you make that decision? And now all of a sudden I wanted to be in that position.
The buck stops at you. Now, going back to your original soccer, where you are the goalie now.
Right. And, I definitely can look back at not just my entire career, but my 13 years at HABCO. And I know some of the decisions I made that, looking back, I'm like, that probably wasn't the smartest, right?
I want to get that one back.
But, in an environment where there's 20 employees and, the type of product that we did, it was a bit more of a sandbox where you could make some mistakes and have it not be detrimental to an employee or a customer.
Right.
So I didn't quite fully appreciate what I was getting myself into. It was fun.
Yeah.
But culturally was very different. 5:05, there's nobody left.
Yeah.
But they didn't need to be.
Right.
Because they were doing all this stuff. And then it was one of those things, okay, my garbage can is full. When's the cleaning company coming by? Oh, no, it's full. Put it in the dumpster, right? So it was that transition, and I've witnessed over my 13 years at HABCO, even though we're much larger today, I see people coming from the OEMs or from much larger companies, and a lot of people say they want to be at a smaller company where we are much more flexible. We can make decisions and change the company, but yet sometimes they choke on the
little basic stuff.
Yeah, they choke on the true flexibility, right? Right. You don't have somebody do your expense reports for you. You do them yourself, right?
Right.
And but culturally was
was a transition one that you made relatively easily, you think?
In some areas, definitely. I loved that flexibility. I loved the fact that I can go talk to Kristen and say, hey, look, this is what I think we should do. And she says, go.
Right.
I don't need a form that approves me to go do this, things like that. So that transition was really welcoming. I think where I struggled initially was underestimating the culture change I was creating. Right? Meaning we didn't have an on-time delivery problem. We didn't have a quality problem. And so where's the burning bridge? When I said, let's improve this, let's go focus on this, let's improve it. It's easy to get pushback of why.
Right.
We're shipping 100% on time.
Right. Let it go.
Yeah. Year 2013, we had one missed delivery the entire year. Right?
It's not bad.
It's not bad at all. Right. But so, I definitely created, a challenged culture to start, because I would be looking at things like policy deployment. Kristen, when we wanted to grow the business, I knew at some point she wanted to exit. Where do we need to be for that? And so we had a lot of employees who were completely fine being a $4 million business.
Right.
completely fine with that. And their priorities weren't necessarily aligned with what Kristen wanted and what she hired me to do and to grow the business. So that was a challenge. And how do you motivate folks to completely transform a business that they're completely happy being the way it was?
Is the answer get new people?
Well, eventually, but I was always of the mindset. I think folks are moldable.
Give them an opportunity.
Give them an opportunity, and I think looking back, there was definitely I definitely had a much longer leash earlier in my career.
Did you anticipate that you were gonna try and buy HABCO? That you would be part of the exit strategy from the beginning?
That was I wouldn't say an expectation, but it was certainly an opportunity that I was interested in because I knew Kristen wanted to exit. To be honest, I think early on I was looking more for an opportunity to be part of the ownership team, or have an equity opportunity. The 2009 actually started. We started the process when Kristen and Bob realized that their daughter didn't want to be part of the business. She was looking to sell. Or at least start to transition. So at that point in time, we developed had a discussion on purchasing part of the business and decided not to buy part of the business because I got some good advice about putting a lot of investment into a business that you don't have majority control over, and so that was it's easy to get excited about the opportunity to do it, but then when you take a step back and realize, okay, maybe it's not the right time, so we continue to work and work together. And then 2011, she said, okay, I'm definitely ready to talk about selling. And I said, okay, but would sell 100%. And she said, sure. So in fact, this is an interesting story too, where I had a different investment group together. I already had a term sheet in place. We were going to buy the business. And when this other group got introduced to Kristen, and I remember our CFO walked in my office and said, I know you work for you, and I know we represent Kristen, but there's another group that's interested in talking to Kristen about buying the company. What do you think I should do? And I already had a term sheet in place. I said, tell her. It's up to her. If it's the right fit for her, so be it. If hopefully it involves me in some manner, but if not, it doesn't. And I was astounded to find out who that group was, or at least the point person of that, and the folks that were the investors in his group wound up being the folks from Wire Mold that I hadn't talked to in years. So
really,
yeah, and I often think about that. If Paul didn't come to the table and say, hey, I've got this other group that's interested, what do you think? If that didn't happen, or if we didn't allow it, I have no idea how successful the business would be today, because we had just enough pennies to pull together to buy the business. This group came in, we were oversubscribed, overcapitalized, and had cash available to invest in the business. And I remember sitting in the due diligence process talking to who was our current chairman of the board. And he said, what's your 5-year plan? Where do you think you can bring this company? And I told him, and he kind of looked at me and said, that's nowhere near good enough. And the number he threw out to me was 5 times the amount that I said. And we're not there yet, but having that backing and having that, having the capital to put to use makes that very achievable. And I feel very confident that we'll get to that number. So
when you sat down and looked at this business, right? And I don't know how far it had gotten between 07 and 12, but it was a low run, highly custom business, very, highly invested in one customer and in one customer segment, basically, right in there. And then have the challenge of going, okay, we want to grow this thing to be 10 times the size or 20 times the size. How do you even get that to be possible? And how do you get from where you were to where you are today and on the way to where you're going?
Yeah, no, great question. So 2007 to 2010 was very interesting because we grew pretty quickly, but then 2010 hit.
Right.
Most people felt it in 2009, but we're in the aftermarket.
Right.
So we felt it a little bit later, and then we lost 50% of our business. I wouldn't say lost. It's capital equipment. So not, what's one of the first areas
they stop buying,
only buying the necessity stuff, right? So we spent a lot of time rationalizing our business at the time, and there was definitely a segment of our business of the custom one-off test stands that when we looked at it, you would think that the really custom stuff is high margin. It wasn't. And you design it, but then there's a lot of rework. There's a lot of things that go into the natural process in a one-off operation that just really wasn't the most profitable part of our business. So then we further rationalized, okay, which types of this one-off business are really the ones that are a drain on the rest of the business. So even during the time in 2010 when our business organically was contracting, we also decided to get out of another portion of our business. And that was difficult because it was still revenue.
Right.
And, I remember points in time in 2010 where I didn't know where the next PO was coming from. I knew we would do more business out there, but you didn't know from whom and when. And, that was tough. It was a tough time for employees. It was a tough time just culturally. It was a tough time in the economy. But I really firmly believe today that was one of the key decisions we made that put us in this path, because as we started to grow, we didn't have that part of the business that was such a resource drain.
So I think this is an important point. So I just want to make sure we get it kind of summarized in a way that people can fully understand. So a core part of the business is these custom pieces.
Yep.
And now you have to you decide to reevaluate and determine if they're even profitable in what you're doing, and you get in there and then you cut out an entire section. So maybe just restate this so I can
yeah.
Make sure
Well, think about it. So we're a small business at the time, and whatever the revenue was, but there would be test stands that the value of that one product was maybe 20% of the revenue for the year. So you get enamored by a big order, but now you think about the quote to cash cycle as well. Right. So the amount of time you take just to partially design a product so you can cost it, so you can price it, and that takes you months to do, depending on the complexity of the product. Then you finally get the order. Now you got to finish the design. Now you got to buy the raw material. You got to build it, and you got to ship it. And that quote to cash cycle, sometimes it was over a year from the time you started the RFQ process to the time you finally collected the cash. And so when you look at cash flow, that was a struggle. So, okay, let's get smarter about it. Let's ask for progress payments. Let's ask for money up front. In some cases, you can get that. In some cases, your competitors weren't offering that. So, you wouldn't necessarily, you struggle with it. So that was really what we started looking at. And that process was difficult because it's tough in an economy like that to say no to opportunities. And not that we turned business away. We just stopped pushing that side of the business. We wouldn't respond to some of the RFQs, or we'd no quote the RFQs, but we wouldn't call up our customer and say, we're no longer going to do this. We're not, right. You've got an order with us. We're not going to do it. But that was important. That really, really was.
Important because why? What was the benefit to the business by making that decision? I mean, we know the pain, right? There's some emotional pain because you don't want to say no to anything. Right. There's some cash pain somewhere, right? Because you don't have orders to book. You don't. There's some of that excitement's gone. So we know the pain, but what's the joy? What's the flip side of that?
When you start coming out of that down cycle, and when orders start coming in, you have more resources available to serve a greater market than the amount of resources that went into that one test stand that we may never, ever, ever build again. Right. But the other thing we did is, as we rationalized that part of the business, what we started realizing was all of our custom test stands were in product families, with the exception of the one section that we got rid of. And so we forced ourselves to change the way we sold product. For example, if a customer says, can you build us something that does A, B, and C? The answer is yes. Okay. And then we'd start the dialogue with the customer, and our designs became very customized. And then you start looking at all these different types of airflow test stands or oil flow test stands. And why is that frame is so similar as that frame, but why is that one 3 inches longer? If we just standardize the frames of all these types of test stands, then we can, now we can start to standardize the process, and we can have, the drawing standardized for frames, regardless of what you flow through it. And so we just started to rationalize all elements of our test stands and try to have the model like Dell had with laptops. We wanted our customers to feel like they were getting a completely custom product. Just like when you go on Dell, you design your own
computer. Right?
I'm not sure if I'm pushing somebody, you're a Dell shop, you're good. But the Dell operation, That's all standard product.
Right.
It's just how you put it together. And that was the mindset we had. And the same thing was...
It's really customizable versus custom.
That's right. That's right.
Which is a huge efficiency gain and a huge kind of like, customer mentality kind of gets that custom mentality, but from a delivery standpoint, man, you can do it so much better.
Absolutely. And at the same time, we also tried to redesign from a lean perspective with our products. Again, I said earlier that nothing we build is value add. All of our product is non-value added. So the longer somebody is on our product, it means they're not flying their mission. But we also realized is applying lean principles to the design side. If somebody's using our test stand, we want to make sure that they're optimizing the use of that test stand and not having any downtime due to changeover. So they've got a product on the test stand. How much time was it taking them to change over one product before they put the next part on? So we started designing things into the test stand, no downtime due to changeovers, multiple setups. So you can be setting up, doing your external setup, have the next part already set up. Well, the other one's flowing. As soon as the other one's done flow, the next one's in. And that really helped us a lot. And so the configuration, the standardization, and also design for serviceability and design for manufacturing, that helped that custom side of the business.
So, but HABCO hasn't just grown just by selling more test stands.
No.
So let's get into that a little bit. You looked at the business and said, okay, we're not going to be a $100 million test stand business, especially if you're making bespoke test bands. Test stands.
Yeah.
So how do we move forward from there? We say, okay, where are we going to get the next set of revenue and grow this company while kind of still building off what we had to start off with?
Yeah. So traditionally, HABCO was an answer the mail type of sales force. We didn't really have sales force. We had sales engineers.
Oh, what in the mail?
And answer the mail.
Oh, answer the mail.
Yeah, answer them. Not ants are in the mail.
Yeah, gotcha. I was confused about that part. Got it.
Answer the mail. Where HABCO had been around since 1970. So there was customers. Customers would call up, and our sales engineers did a great job of saying, yes, we can build that. But there was very little external sales. We didn't have an external sales force. Maybe we had an individual that was trying to do some sort of business development. But that was the biggest area that we invested in at the end of 2012. So when we bought the business, we put a significant amount of money into the sales and marketing. Not just, we rebranded and things like that, but people, the personnel. Because when you really start to look at who we sold to and how big the industry is, even with the size sales force we have today, we're barely scratching the surface. And so we hired some great folks. My head of sales is the best person I've ever worked with. He was a past pilot, A&P mechanic, and he's been in the industry, so he knows the aircraft, he knows the airframe, he knows the engine, he knows the product because he's used it all. Right. When he was a mechanic, or he was when he was flying, and so I really love working with him. And here's a good example of somebody that is far smarter than I am. I know the operations side and I know where we want to go, but I can't sit in front of I'm getting better at it now after 13 years. But I can't sit in front of an engineer at one of the OEMs or at an end user and talk the details specifically about the product. And he can, and he knows how to get it done. So to answer the question more directly, hire Jeff Kretzmer. No, please don't. No, keep with us. But
so actually, I'm going to ask you that question because we talked a lot about, and you brought up a few times about this, hiring people that are smarter than you, hiring great people to help build the business. Look, it's a demanding market out there, right? You're not the only person trying to hire people like Jeff and other people that HABCO's hired, Paul and other folks. So, what's your strategy, man? Like, how are you guys getting out there and recruiting this top talent? And you've been recruiting them. Obviously now you guys are a little bit bigger, so you're pretty sizable. But, how did you recruit these people when you guys were 20, 30, 40 people?
Yeah, tough. Yeah, right. Because when I say tough, because it's tough to find the person that wants to come to a small company like that. So, folks like Jeff and Paul and some of the other great folks that joined us years ago, they're all cut from the same cloth of wanting to succeed, not wanting status quo. There's nothing wrong. We'd have no problem if we wanted to just be the same size we are today, and we can do a really good job at that. There's so much business in the industry. If we told all of our customers, here's all we want to do, and here's the capacity we have. Once it's full, that's it. We could have a very profitable business.
Right.
But that's not what motivates us.
Right.
What motivates us, what motivates Jeff, the team, is making our customers happy, solving problems that, making our customers, the direct folks that we interface with, having them be promoted.
Right.
That's the enjoyment we get, because as they get promoted and they get more responsibility, that means more opportunity for us. And we really, really focus on solving our customers' problems, and not just the company side of the customer, but the people. Where's your biggest pain point? If we can help free up resources so your team can spend the time doing what you need them to be doing, then you're better off. And I'm okay being in that space. I told you it wasn't sexy, but we love it. We love it.
And so where have you grown? Because you guys are doing all kinds of different stuff now. So how have you decided what new products to launch and what new areas to grow into?
Yeah, it's funny because if you were to go back and read the business plan that I put together when we were selling the business, so much of what's in there is not in place today, right? There were certain parts of the industry that we thought was the right entree to do more. Some new products that we started getting involved with the Air Force and even with Sikorsky that just great ideas, but it wasn't what was going to help us grow. And I remember sitting with Jeff, because Jeff, we hired, his first day of full-time work was January 3rd of 2013, a few days after the acquisition. So it was kind of interesting for him coming at that time. And I sat him down and we sat there and started talking about, okay, here's what the board's looking for. Here's where they want us to go. And put money aside because we've got capital. How do we grow this thing? And we just started throwing the proverbial spaghetti against the wall, see what stuck. And there was some things we started back then that have paid off tremendously, and other ones were kind of a little bit of a dead end. But how we grew was knowing that we needed to diversify and being comfortable with who we are in the section of the industry that we're in. Mm-hmm. So many people want to be on the aircraft, and that's fine. I mean, there's definitely a part of me that still says, okay, high volume production to augment a lot of the stuff we're doing would be great. But as soon as you're comfortable in your own skin, and you can accentuate the areas that you're good at, knowing you still have problems, you still have things you got to fix. That's where we focused on. And what we started really going for is we knew we couldn't grow the business to the manner that we wanted to by being a transactional supplier. Meaning, you get your PO, then you're done. We still do that on a daily basis, but we wanted to focus on the partnerships. How do we go about being value add for the biggest players in the industry, especially being right here in Connecticut? The fact that I have Pratt & Whitney 5 miles down the road in one direction, Sikorsky 30 miles in another direction, and a lot of the tier ones and everybody else in the area, it's a great place to be. So how do we go and penetrate that? And that's what we focused on. We didn't set our sights on how do we grow today. It's what do we need to do to be at this point in 3 years and this point in 5 years. And so if you were to look at our P&L over all those years, we wouldn't have the most profitable years because we were continuing to invest in the business. That's one of the things I love about our investor base. It's one of the things I love about our board. Every discussion is about, here's where we want to be. What do you need in order for us to get there? Yes, we want to make money today. We got to pay the bills and we got to, we want to invest in our employees. But it's the short-term hit for the long-term gain has really been the focus.
Is that a mentality that came out of wire molds?
And I wasn't at a high enough level to know what discussions were going around the
investor
table.
Base. That's why I asked.
But
is that how they did it there too?
What I think a little bit more of the focus at wire mold was going off and doing some of these acquisitions of adjacent space that were ripe for improvement. Because wire mold did a great job of, the first thing that Art and the team did every time they did an acquisition was that he'd go lead a Kaizen event and help improve the business. And so, they focused on being the number one supplier in the industry, 20 times inventory turns and things like that. But certainly the focus of continuous improvement. And if you can be the fastest at what you do and with perfect quality, why would anybody go elsewhere? Right. And that's kind of what Art's focus was at wire mold at the time. And so for us, it was, how do we partner in an area that the customer needs the help,
right? And
do it in a manner that makes their life easier. And we've been fortunate enough to sign license agreements on both Sikorsky side and Pratt side. They're on our website. You can see, the types of things that we do, and how we branch out from there. Just because if we sell product on the commercial side with Pratt, well, we can do some stuff on the military. How do we penetrate that way, or vice versa? And that's really where Jeff and I started to focus is long term. let's sign some nice agreements that we can have as our base business, and then grow from there.
And is there any guiding star, any North Star in terms of knowing what the right next move is, or if the business is a business that makes sense to get into?
No, not at all. I would say maybe the North Star is are just sitting in our conference room having discussions saying, well, what about this opportunity? And we sit there and we say, all right, let's try it.
Right.
I think the best thing that HABCO can do is fail fast. Yeah. Right. That's one of the things we try to get really good at, because it's okay to try something new. It's okay to try to service a part of the market, but we got to know pretty darn quickly if it's the right thing. and there's been some cases or some projects now that we're struggling with. We said, yes, we can do it. We know we can, but
do we want to keep doing it long term?
Yeah, or how long will it take us to get to the point where we can be really good at that?
Right.
And that's the area right now where we continue to invest in some of those products that we've struggled with over the past year. But I still want them. I still want to do it because the customer needs it, and it'd be good business for us, but we got to get to the right level first.
So as you guys are growing and making decisions, right? And I think, this is a question I like to ask, because I think everyone faces this challenge, which is there's always a list a mile long of things we'd all like to do,
right?
But there's limited time and limited resources within which to get it done. So when you guys are looking at those investments, and obviously you want to invest in new sales, but you also want to improve operations. You've got facility issues, and as you bring in new products and new lines, you need more space to put them in. So you got to deal with that and inventory management, right, and people. So what do you guys do at HABCO to kind of balance and make those investment decisions?
So one of the good things for us is a lot of the investments we've made has been with some partnerships with the state. So we did get some good grants or some loans that can turn to grants. So that helped to start, because we've got this pool of money that's available. So in addition to having the proper capital to start with, some of the personnel and facility investment, that allowed us to have a pool of funds that we could invest ahead of time.
Sure.
Because that, for me, has been the important part, where it's been the difficult part, where when you were about to sign one of these agreements, the OEM is not going to turn it on until they're confident that we have
right,
the resources
chicken
in place.
And egg situation.
Right. And so that's where we would put our investments. We would put our investments from people and equipment to try to get as much control over the demand as possible within reason. I mean, I'm never going to be able to do 100% of all of our business in-house. It's just not feasible. But if we can rationalize part of that demand, even though we don't know what product is going to be ordered, we don't know what tool a mechanic is going to break today that they need to reorder for maintenance on a JT3 engine. But we can look at product families, we can look at core capabilities, we can look at size, and try to figure out what portion of the business that we're doing comes from that market, and then go and invest in equipment to do that and start there and then grow. And so
but then when do you know, how do you make the decision? Because it's not just facilities, it's not just equipment, right? It's when do you make the next hire? When do you grow out the sales staff? When is it time to, listen, it's sales, it sometimes measures itself, right? I get a guy or gal, or we bring it in more than we're paying them, and we've got targets.
Yeah.
But you've got back office, there's accounting, billing, right, all that. IT, sure. I mean, how do you guys, how do you make those decisions? I mean, but IT, no, you mean IT, right? So, ERP management, right, and stuff like that. And we've talked about that at your facility. Like, when is it time to, that system needs to get, upgraded,
right?
ERP
is a great example. We ran our business for decades on an Access database,
right,
all the way up until 2015, actually really to the end of 2015. And it was a robust Access database, but it's not the type of system that, we could run a $50, $100, $200 million company over time.
I might have to edit out robust Access database. I think it might be an oxymoron.
Oxymoron. Robust enough, maybe.
There you go.
Yeah. Forgot where I was sitting. Sorry.
Complicated the Access database.
Right. And so we also knew at that time that in order for us to get these license agreements, now we're responsible for all these SKUs. We're responsible for, serialization. We're responsible for all these things. There was no way that our Access database could handle that. So invest in ERP. Okay, well, at the time, how many employees did we have? How many employees that were at HABCO at the time? HABCO was still the only company they've ever worked for.
Right.
Never had to do transactions, never had to do that. So culturally, that was just a big change. But you know how much ERP systems cost. And so we had to pick a system that was right for where we wanted to be, not a system that was right for where we were. And that was, that's an interesting mindset to have.
Swallow hard and open that checkbook.
Right, exactly. And, we're still feeling the pains from that implementation that went live on January 1st, 2016. And we're still not using the majority of the modules and the power that the system has. And as we grow, we'll continue to turn on more things. But, I think really what it takes is, first of all, flexibility from an ownership standpoint to make those investments. Because there's no way we could have bootstrapped that system and do what we're doing today. So it takes that hard decision initially to say, okay, we're going to forego short-term profits for that long-term gain. So that's really the mindset.
Yeah. No, that's I know. I think that's an important mindset, and it's hard, man. Just as being as a business owner myself, you want to be able to make those calls, and they sound good on paper, and they can be easy to talk about, over drinks at a podcast, at a seminar, whatever. But when it comes down to sit at the table and like I said, swallow hard and open that checkbook, because you got to make that commitment to the future. It can be tough. Right.
And then knowing how expensive it is just for all of the consulting and all of the, the work post implementation that you still need to do. Was every decision we've made right? Absolutely not.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, is that the goal? I mean, I think the goal's got to be to have the net gain, right? And not try and be, if our goal is try and make every right decision, we're probably going to be stuck not making any decisions.
Right. If it's 2 steps forward and 3 backwards, you're not going the right direction. But if it's 2 and 1, you're at least moving forward. But it's really trying to balance that that investment and the ability to be successful today for your customer. You got to be like that duck, right? Where chaos under the water, but above the water, everything is calm and pretty. And that's kind of what we have going on. I'm sure some of our customers will say you're not calm and pretty, on top, because we have our operational struggles. We've grown very fast, but it's continuing to pedal fast underneath.
Got to do it. No, it looks good. Well, listen, we got to start getting to a rapid fire round of questions. I'll wrap it up. But before I do, I did want to ask one thing. HABCO's grown a lot. You've put a huge imprint on it. I realize it's a 50-year-old company this year, but I think a lot of people would look at HABCO under your leadership has changed quite a bit. What do you love most about culture at HABCO and working at HABCO? What's like, you look at there and someone was going to come work for you guys there. What would you be like, hey man, this is what's awesome about working here?
No 2 days are ever the same. I mean, so many people that go and work in an environment that they're doing the same thing every day. Go back to HID, folks that are just testing cards all day long, monotonous. There is not one position, even something like inspection, because every product is different. There is variety in what we do. So that's number one, I think, for sure, is that there is no monotony. It's every day is different. Number two is we all have job descriptions. We all have departments that we're involved in, but there's a reason why every job description also has a line that says, and any other duty asked of you, because we can't survive in silos. Yes, you have a boss. You've got to work. You've got to get your things done, but it's okay to go over the swim lane. You go into somebody else's swim lane, because at the end of the day, we've got a customer that needs a product. And I don't care whether you're an engineer that's working in engineering, as a design engineer, manufacturing engineer, or a sales engineer. If we have an engineering need, come on the shop floor. Let's get this thing done. And that's actually an area that a lot of folks love about HABCO. And this is no knock on any other business. You look at an OEM. If you're a mechanical engineer, you go work for an OEM, you're sitting amongst other engineers, like-minded engineers, and maybe you're focusing on, one small component of a sub-assembly, and that's your life for a period of time. HABCO, if you're a manufacturing engineer, you are working with electrical engineering and software engineering every day. You're working with sales, finance, operations. So you touch so much more. And as we do our surveys and we have all these, the feedback we get from our employees, that's one of the things that folks love, is that they feel valued, because they, I'm sure other people, there will be some that will say, I don't feel valued, but the reality is they feel that they can get involved in a lot of things, and they become more valuable as a person, because the skill set they get by touching other things.
So for somebody that wanted to be in finance and have the 72nd floor corner office, you don't even have a corner office. You have a window, and you're not on the ground floor, but not even in the corner even today. You look back on that decision to keep taking those jobs at Wire and Mold as a springboard to something amazing. You happy that you got into manufacturing after driving by all those factories and blowing them off for years?
Yeah, it's absolutely something I think about quite often, decisions you make in life and how they turn out. I'm sure you have plenty of those decisions that you've made over your time. They're not sure what impact it was going to have on your life. And I'm humbled by it every day. I have yet to have a day at HABCO where I dread coming in. I don't. Are there days that are extremely frustrating? Absolutely. But for me, it's a constant challenge. And, we're just starting to scratch the surface of what we can do. And I'm thankful for the mentors I've had in my life. I'm thankful for the opportunities that have been given to me. And who knows if I had what my life would be like if I had said no to the internship and still gone down on Wall Street. I talked to some of my buddies from college. I see what they're doing. It's not a life that I guess I would have been happy with.
So if you're talking to a kid right now who's, there's so much pressure on kids still to, maybe go into finance or be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. Entrepreneurship is a little bit cool now, but what would you say to kids who would be thinking about maybe getting into manufacturing and what that could mean for their future? Like, what would you tell a kid as a career counselor? If I made you a career counselor for a minute.
Yeah. I'd say just look around. Everything you see is, outside of nature, everything here has been manufactured. Very little exists in this world that you touch on a daily basis that didn't go through some sort of manufacturing or design process. And, it's not the dirty manufacturing it used to be. We're not even getting into talk about automation and, additive manufacturing, anything like that. You go to any aerospace manufacturer. It's not what's in kids' minds. It's not what was in my mind when I would drive by factories, right? And if the opportunity to have a part of creating something, whether it's this microphone or whether it's a part that flies, it's cool. It's cool to see an idea transformed into something that's tangible. It's not a service industry. I mean, there's a service element of it, but it's really neat to see an idea come out the other end and get into a customer's hands. And
be something that you can actually touch. Yeah, man, I agree. Something I think about all the time. Well, listen, it's been awesome. Let's go to a rapid fire round of questions. Are you ready?
Bring it on.
All right. There are right and wrongs here, so you'll figure it out as we go. Here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Absolutely Red Sox.
Yes. Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Starbucks.
Staycation or exotic destination when you guys travel?
Exotic destination.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Right now, SUV. Too much hockey gear.
If you could do anything, if you had to do something other than what you're doing today as CEO and president of HABCO, what would you do?
Your job.
Ooh. If you can have, what's your favorite business book?
Stephen Covey, 7 Habits.
Oh, that's good. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, for those people that don't know what that is. And what's one thing, Brian, that you learned early in your career, or early in your life, that you think helped propel you to the success that you've had?
Treat others with respect.
And what's one thing that you learned later in your life or later in your career that you'd like to go back and tell young Brian that you think would really help him if he just listened to you?
You're not always right.
You learned that one pretty well, though, I have to say. Yeah. That's pretty good. By the way, you had almost all of the right answers. So very, very, very well done there. Yeah. Hey, so Brian, if people want to reach you, learn more about HABCO, talk about what you guys do, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, habco.biz. My contact information is on there. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Brian Montanari.
Brian Montanari, habco.biz. We will put all that stuff in the podcast notes. It's been really awesome having you. There's been a ton that we've covered, a lot of history, a lot of really good kind of business lessons there, especially for people that want to be in business leadership. And at the very end of our conversation, I always like to ask the guest, if someone was to just hear this one thing, this one takeaway at the end from everything that we've talked about that you think if they listened or implemented could really have a positive impact on their business or their career, of the stuff that we talked about, what do you think we talked about that would be that one thing that really have some?
First and foremost, you gotta have passion for what you do. It's very difficult to be successful in anything if you don't have passion for it. So for me, that's something that I think about all the time. And that's why I said there has not been one day where I woken up and not wanted to go to work. Tell my wife that, but so that and it's surround yourself with people that are smarter and treat people with respect.
And man, those are three. Having passion for what you do, surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you, and treating people with respect. Those are classic, and they're really, really great. I think something that I'd say sort of took away from what you said, which I'm not sure if we actually 100% said it directly, but it's been something that came up a lot in kind of your career story, and it's something I kind of relate to a lot that I think people could really learn from, which is take opportunities.
Yeah.
Take opportunities to try new things, to learn different aspects of the business, look at what's in front of you and learn to say yes to certain things,
right?
And take those risks and take those chances, especially if you can do it in something you're passionate about. It really pays off.
Yeah, and recognize if you're failing, try to fail fast.
Fail fast, that's right, and get out of that.
Yeah.
Brian, it's been awesome having you on. I always enjoy chatting with you, and this was no exception, dude. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback and hope you subscribe. But what I want the most is to build a community where we learn and grow with each other. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of the time we're spending together. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.